This is the
Five Starr
Podcast.
Let me talk to you. Hi. What do you guys want to talk about? Thanks, guys. Back to you.
Well, we definitely have a lot to get into today. It's Sunday, which means it's recording day. And then hopefully by the time this gets uploaded tomorrow, it'll be sometime between noon and 4. That is one major flaw with the move. My Wi-Fi reception's pretty good. Holy crap, it takes forever to upload stuff. Friday show, people, let me tell you, you would not believe how long it took to upload that Friday show. I mean, it took almost 3 hours just to get through the uploading process. And then like another 10 minutes to fully process and generate for YouTube playability. God, it was a pain. And I really don't know if there's a way to work around that. I mean, I turned off sleep mode so I can walk away from the computer and let the uploading continue without me having to monitor every 5 minutes. But it still takes forever and a day. I mean, I can already tell this show is going to fall into that same issue. But we're going to get the recording done. That way I can start putting together the editing process sooner rather than later. I might even try to upload it tonight if I have some time, just to save the hassle of waiting around. Because I'm already going to be out doing stuff tomorrow anyway. So, folks, thanks for stopping in to watch the FSWR channel. It's the wrestling podcast nobody knows, but everybody needs. And we are here to talk about some WWF WWE content. The Bad Blood special aired over the weekend. It's been a long time since they broke out this concept. I don't even remember the last time they aired a WWE Bad Blood. I mean, that has to be going back to, 2002? 2003? Albeit my memories of WWE after 2002 are very sketchy, because I mentally checked out after the Invasion debacle. But they brought it back for a special occasion here, and, well, they earned it. They absolutely earned it. And we'll also get to Retro Raw at the very end. We at least still have access to watching those shows through the remainder of 2024 on Peacock. So we're going to enjoy it while we can. Because that might be another NXT situation once we hit January. Whatever access we previously had to all that old content, that might be going away permanently. But we're going to remain positive. Because that's what this channel is all about, brother. Positivity. But for now, we'll just stick with the Bad Blood special and Retro Raw. And what do you say we cover the Bad Blood PLE? Or at least go ahead and cover the only thing that mattered on the card. Pretty sure y'all can guess which match that was. Before we do our usual rundown, again, covered this before, but it warrants a discussion anyway. I am a much bigger advocate of the 3-hour, 5-match WWE pay-per-view format than the 6-hour, 9-match slog that AEW puts their audience through. Like, I can watch the majority of these shows without getting fatigued or bored. I'm not mentally drained by halfway through the card. I actually find myself watching the majority of the show without having to leave the room, especially during stuff I don't care about. And you're always going to run into that problem. There's always going to be that evident piss break match that I need to fit in. I mean, you can pretty much assume that if they're booking more than one girls match on the card, one of those segments are going to eat the bullet. At that point, it's basically a matter of who would I rather see work. I mean, for me, it's pretty much a given that if Rhea Ripley's involved, I'm going to watch her stuff. Even if Liv Morgan isn't my cup of tea and never will be. But you figure, I watch 4 of the 5 matches. Generally, the shows are anywhere from halfway decent to considerably good. They're not ungodly long. You know, overall, I'm not going to say there's been a standout premium live special under the Hunter regime that's blown me away. I thoroughly enjoyed the SummerSlam show and whatever city it was, I already forgot. Cleveland, I think. Like, that card I remember being pretty solid from start to finish. These buffer PLEs kind of had the same flow a lot of those old TakeOver specials did. Shorter shows, not overloading the card with a bunch of bodies, mainly prioritizing the important programs and all the top talent. For me, that always gels better than let's see how many people we can wedge onto a show regardless of whether or not they're a draw. Because at that point, you're essentially just muddying up the waters by paying for a bunch of underneath or mid-level talent that nobody cares about. And of course, the issue with streaming these shows on Peacock, I'm never really given the opportunity to see the full video packages prior to all the matches airing. So unless I'm going out of my way to watch some of the pre-show content or search for some of the stuff on YouTube, I mean, I'm essentially just paying for a bunch of matches. But I always like the way WWE puts together promo packages. Production value is always outstanding. So that always sucks. But again, I had to compliment this pay-per-view or PLE model. I know that not everybody agrees with the format. There are fans that prefer the longer cards and the longer shows. For a WrestleMania or a SummerSlam, maybe even a Survivor Series card, I could get behind trying to work in 7 or 8 matches. For the in-between shows, I don't think it's necessary. Yeah, like, I heard they were going to contemplate doing Sami Zayn and Gunther for the World Heavyweight title on this show. For whatever reason, it didn't make the card. I guess I could argue for rearranging things or adding a supplementary match to the show. You could have found a way to maybe put Zayn and Gunther on here. I'd have probably nixed the Bayley-Nia Jax match because, well, see the aforementioned name Nia Jax. Love Bayley. Nothing against her. But ain't nobody paying to see the human botch machine Nia Jax. Especially not on a PLE. So you probably could have worked the Gunther-Sammy match onto this card, and I mean, it would have complemented the show pretty considerably. But overall, I was satisfied with what they gave us. I don't necessarily know if I agree with them starting the show with the Drew McIntyre CM Punk Cell match. If I had one major gripe with the show overall, that was it. This has been WWE's hottest feud in all of 2024. I don't care what anybody says. Whether you're a Punk fan or not, you can't disagree that this has been the must-see attraction of WWE storytelling in all of this year. They built this thing up since January. They've done a phenomenal job working the people into believing that these two legitimately hate one another. The promo segments have been great. The angles have been off the charts. They've had two great matches in their series thus far. Like, for them to start the show with this match and not save it until the main event, that was a huge misfire on their part. I get that Roman's back. You know, you laid out the story of him and Cody needing to work together to try to end this Bloodline 2.0 thing with Solo taking charge. I can see from their vantage point that was probably just as important as the Drew Punk feud. We can debate that amongst ourselves. I disagree. And that's not a shot at Roman or Cody. And considering what ended up happening at the end of the show, I guess I can understand why they needed to close with the tag match. It's the old "that doesn't work for me, brother" playbook from the sappy ring veteran. We'll talk about that later. I just think that given the circumstances and the overall scope of where we are in the timeline, it just seemed more fitting to close the show with the Drew Punk match. You know, especially because of the cell environment and, well, just my old school approach to how I think it's always better to end things with the big gimmick match instead of putting it in the opener or even the middle of the card. But whatever. So Drew versus Punk. Let's talk about it. By the way, we're going to completely disregard all the cinematic BS in the first 5 minutes. And whatever in the crap that deal was with Jade Cargill, Bianca Belair, and Naomi. All I'm going to ask is for somebody to answer one simple question for me. What the fuck is the purpose for a live host on a PLE when they never end up doing jack shit? Like, not only was it incredibly awkward watching Jade, Bianca, and Naomi posing in the ring like statues for 2 minutes, literally, the only thing they did was say that tonight was going to be historic. And then they plugged the cell match. I don't think they appeared for the remainder of the program. If they did, it was during a period where I left the room for a bit. I think they were up in the skybox hanging out with some of the legends, but like, what? Why were they there? And why did they need to host the show? Makes no goddamn sense. But all right, fine. I'll get off my soapbox. For real. Let's talk about Punk versus McIntyre. If the SummerSlam match was great, if the bull rope match in Berlin was great, this is a fucking banger. I mean, holy cow. Where do you even start with trying to break down everything that happened here? You know, I kind of alluded to it when I was talking a minute ago. How they spent the last 10 months really trying to get the fans to believe these guys detested one another. And that really was the focal story of the entire match. After everything they've done to one another, certainly after everything they've said back and forth to each other, this needed to be more gruesome than the two previous fights. You needed juice. You needed heavy angles worked throughout the match. You know, obviously when you're factoring in gimmicks, it's always a touchy subject because when do you draw the line? When is it too much? I think they used all the tools that they needed to. You know, they pulled out gimmicks from under the ring that you would traditionally buy as things that would be stored under a wrestling ring. Chairs, tables. You know, they had the toolbox with the wrench, the screwdrivers, the pliers, and all that. They never overused the gimmicks to the point where it just broke down into a garbage indie match. They didn't break out kendo sticks or any of the other trash I would usually shake my head at. Poor Drew, I think, really got the brunt of that toolbox blow. I had heard some rumors that he actually got busted open hard way. I don't know if I really believe that, so much as I'd buy the idea that he probably bladed a little too deep. Because he was pouring a gusher through pretty much the rest of the match. Made for some awesome visuals later on, though. Especially when both guys were exhausted and sweating like motherfuckers. But the blood was crucial in a match like this. You had to do it. It was the right kind of environment, the right kind of story, the right timing. I love that they actually utilized the cell as a weapon. That's almost a foreign concept by today's cage match standards. Obviously, you had your big oh shit moments that popped the crowd and kept him engaged, but they actually built up to those dramatic moments. Whether it was the near fall sequences with both guys hitting their finish, the big table bump that Drew gave the Punk on the floor, and holy fuck, that was a real testament to Drew's strength. Being able to lift Punk over the turnbuckle like that and safely plant himself and Punk through the table with that little amount of wiggle room. Christ, I'd take a suplex from Drew through furniture any day of the week. At least I know he's trustworthy. I mean, the whole match was a roller coaster ride from start to finish. I can't really do it justice by reviewing everything spot by spot. It truly is one of those spectacles that you just have to go out of your way to watch. By far, my favorite part of the match. The moment Drew came in with that black bag, I knew exactly what they were trying to do. Like in the back of my head, there was a sliver of expectation. Like, oh shit. They're going to break out the tacks. And it's going to immediately kill my interest in the match because I absolutely detest the thumbtack spot in wrestling. But then I remembered, no, hold on, wait a second. These guys are pros. They're not fucking outlaw mud show indie marks. So the next thought that occurred to me, it's the bracelet bits. Sure enough, Drew dumps the bag of beads over Punk's head. I was like, fuck yeah, dude. That's pro wrestling right there. And it was all karma for Drew when he tried to set up Punk for the Claymore again. Punk moves out of the way. God, this poor goddamn Drew McIntyre. He runs full speed toward Punk, smashes his tailbone right against the side of the ring steps. I'm like, how is this guy not fucked? And thankfully, they didn't go another 10 minutes after that spot. Because Drew was spent by that point, you could tell. I mean, he already struggled earlier on in lifting up the ring steps. He was really favoring his back at one point. I mean, either that was legit or he's the best seller in wrestling in 2024. So Punk gives Drew one final GTS. Basically falls on top of him with his dead body weight. 1, 2, 3. Best match on the card, hands down. Arguably the best match in WWE in all of 2024. At least from where I'm sitting. Yeah, I haven't really gone back to peruse the catalog of WWE PLE since the Rumble. But I would venture to guess that I would struggle to find anything that topped this. And I can already tell, the AEW sheep are going to criticize it because it wasn't violent enough. And nobody shoved a fucking hypodermic needle down the other's throat. Therefore, it only gets 4.5 stars as opposed to 5. All kidding aside, though, I do think a match like this is really going to be the testament to the true disconnect between pro wrestling fans and indie marks. Because if you're going to do blood, if you're going to do warped violence, this is how you fucking do it, man. You make it look as real as possible without insulting the people's intelligence. I mean, the use of gimmicks in this thing really paled in comparison to the story of how they were working the match, the way they interacted with each other. The camera work was outstanding. The psychology was fantastic. I mean, I honestly don't remember the last match where I could plausibly say that was one of the best matches I've seen in a long time. I think a close second would maybe be the MJF Punk dog collar match from a couple years ago. And that's a big maybe. I'd have to go back and rewatch it for contextual purposes. I still would probably put this match above that one. But I can't praise it enough. I mean, I could spend another 45 minutes talking about it if I wanted to. This is kind of one of those once-in-a-lifetime feuds that you just don't see too often in pro wrestling anymore, and it's really unfortunate. It's an excellent, excellent match. The kind of pro wrestling that's really, truly missing from today's product. Those genuine, authentic blood feuds with two grown adult men that you can believably hate one another. The way things used to be, brother. Back when wrestling was a real men's soap opera. And not this sissy-ass product we get today, by and large. So after that instant classic was over, so was pretty much the rest of the show as far as I was concerned. At least up until the main event. I'm partially kidding, but I mean, come on. What the fuck else was supposed to follow that? Sure as hell wasn't Bayley versus Nia Jax for the women's title. And that was without me having watched the match. I mean, this was the epitome of trying to follow a shooting with a stabbing. I actually kind of felt bad for both girls here, because this was a total death slot to be put in. There was no way around it. But I had to use this as my break segment to go make dinner, because I knew I wasn't going to lose sleep over having not watched it. So I went to go fry a couple eggs, had some bacon and toast. Came back at some point during the closing moments when Tiffany Stratton was out there arguing with Nia about something. All I remember is Nia retained. And her bodysuit was hideously unappealing in every sense of the word. So those are my thoughts on that. Which brings us to Finn Balor versus Damian Priest. The minute I saw Balor come out there with a title around his waist, I was like, wait, Finn Balor is the World Heavyweight Champion? When in the fuck did that happen? No, it was actually one half of the tag titles. And if you asked me to name his tag team partner, I would be completely out to lunch, brother. The fact that I didn't even recognize the fucking thing as a tag belt should tell you all you need to know. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. I tried my best to pay attention to this match. I found myself zoning out a lot. And I think that really boils down to two factors. One, the fact that we're talking about Finn Balor. And two, the whole thing comes off as such a downgrade compared to the work Priest was doing prior to SummerSlam. Am I the only one that has that opinion? Look, I get it. They put the world title on him. In hindsight, probably wasn't the best booking call because he really didn't click as the world champion. At some point, you knew the Judgment Day breakup was going to be what caused him to lose the title. It's exactly what happened. they were at least kind of clever with the way they went about layering the turns with both Dom and Balor. But now we're basically dealing with a watered-down Judgment Day 2.0 with Balor at the helm. You got JD McDoofus and Carlito out there involved. It's just... there's nothing about this group that stands out. It's a meaningless mid-card heel faction with no credibility. At least when Rhea, Priest, and Dom were a part of it, everybody served a unique role in the group. Even if I never really thought all that highly of them once they kicked Edge to the curb. God, that was well over a year ago, too. And this faction is still a thing. I guess it comes down to this. Beyond the predictability of Priest winning here, what exactly is the end goal with Damian Priest after he wipes out all the Judgment Day geeks? He and Rhea already beat Dom and Liv in the mixed tag last month. He beat Balor clean here, despite the interference attempts from JD and Carlito. So, what now? Are they going to try to go back to the well with him and Gunther for the World Heavyweight title? Not necessarily a bad idea from a booking standpoint. Do people really want to see it? Debatable. I just don't really see what the expectations were with this match to begin with. Finn Balor is what he is in 2024. He's the fall guy. You always know he's going to lose. So why bother getting invested? You want me to be honest with you? If I were put in charge of booking this match, if I had any say in the way it was laid out, if you really want to give Priest some momentum back, you should have just railed through Balor in under 5 minutes. Make the win decisive. You know, instead of having this 50-50 back and forth match where Balor's getting visual pins on him. Because that didn't do Priest any favors. You know, especially with him going over anyway. What would have been wrong with just having him squash Balor? Is it really going to hurt him in 2024? Like, come on. Bloom's been off the rose with that experiment for well over 10 years. So yeah, I really didn't dig this match. It was there. It was in the background. But I didn't care one way or the other. And that kind of got me thinking back to the conversation about what if they just had Gunther and Sammy wrestle on the show for the World Heavyweight title? Just maybe knock off one or two of the other matches and give those guys a spot on the card. Probably wouldn't have been a bad idea in hindsight. Now, they did factor in Sami Zayn and Gunther on the card. Given the way things went down here, probably would have just preferred seeing the straight title match. Before we get to that angle, we should probably cover the Hunter announcement. They were hyping this groundbreaking announcement from the top of the show. The Game Changer. So immediately as a smart fan, your inclination is to think, well, it's just going to be a bunch of BS. And it was. The grand announcement was they're doing some kind of world champion versus world championship match at the next Crown Jewel show in Saudi. Of course, that includes the girls. You always got to include the girls into the conversation. Wouldn't want to ruffle any feathers there. And I guess the winner of the champion versus champion match wins some other made-up title belt that they specifically designed for that show. I don't know. I don't care. It's stupid. I figured the announcement would pertain to something regarding the way they've totally fucked up the streaming services. Apparently that was wishful thinking on my part. So eventually Gunther interrupts, comes down to do a heat promo, basically telling Hunter that he's looking forward to being crowned as whatever in the hell they're calling this new belt, the Crown Jewel World Champion or something like that. And of course, all throughout the night, they're showing a bunch of legends sitting around ringside that attended. You had DDP out there, Big Papa Pump, Jacqueline. I think Lillian Garcia was out there at one point. Obviously, the big name that played a part in this angle here was Goldberg. Or Bill, as the announcers kept referring to him as. Because it's a shoot, brother. So Gunther's cutting the heel promo on Goldberg and his son, basically telling him that he hopes Bill's a better father than he is a pro wrestler, which somehow was the straw that broke the camel's back. Goldberg was more outraged at the idea that he's less fitting as a pro wrestler than he is an actual father. Shouldn't that be the other way around? Especially since we already know Goldberg's a family man. I don't know. The point here is Goldberg jumps the rail and gets swarmed by security almost immediately. Of course, it's ridiculous to think that he and Gunther are actually going to fight. Pretty sure Goldberg made it abundantly clear in numerous interviews that he's never stepping foot in a ring again. So they use it as a distracting tactic to bring out Sammy so he could go after Gunther. He gave him a few stomps in the corner. Their fight spilled out into the aisleway, and I mean, it was what it was. I guess they're doing the Sammy Gunther match on Raw, which is kind of interesting. I can see the purpose for doing an angle like this if you're going to try to pop a number for the TV rating. It's not a newfound concept that WWE likes to work in angles on pay-per-views to set up things for the television show. Did this really need to happen on the Bad Blood special? Probably not. I mean, I didn't hate the segment, but like, the conversation is all about placement. You know, book this on an episode of Raw. That's the time and the place to do it. On a premium live special where we're supposed to be paying to see blow-offs and grudge matches, it's always going to come across as void filler. So we eventually made it to the Rhea Ripley-Liv Morgan other world title match. And the stipulation here is that Dirty Dom had to be suspended above the ring in a shark cage, as opposed to just banning him from ringside under penalty of being suspended and or fired. But hey, it's pro wrestling. What are you going to do? Expect logic? I did approve of the Dirty Dom toilet paper merch. That was good. If there's ever another scamdemic and people start panic buying toilet paper again, you know WWE's going to make bank off the Dirty Dom TP. So I'll be honest. I thought this match kind of sucked. The biggest issue with shark cage gimmicks, beyond the fact that they're typically lame as fuck, and they always lead to the same outcome, it's always the issue of you just waiting to see how they utilize the cage as part of the match. Most of the time, it's the heel passing off a gimmick or trying to find ways to escape the cage. So like the minute they ring the bell, I'm just kind of counting down the clock, waiting to see how they factor Dom into the match. The work here I thought was kind of sloppy and awkward. Liv especially, dude. I thought she looked pretty good in that SummerSlam match, all things considered. Wasn't very high praise to begin with. Here, she looked awkward through the entire match. Her timing was off. She was trying to do all these goofy-looking indie spots, and Rhea just had no idea how to feed for her. Again, I've never been a Liv Morgan fan. I don't see it. I don't get it. Is the annoying, slutty, vindictive heel. She works that gimmick extraordinarily well. I can get behind that. Problem is, then you eventually have to see her wrestle, and well, yeah. I'm going to come back to the whole Dom angle in a minute here, because I had a few thoughts that ran through my head when I saw that go down. But just overall, the match was no good. The crowd, I thought, was unusually dead for most of it. And that was kind of odd, especially for a more modern WWE fan base. Those people usually cheer for anything. Someone dropped a deuce in the middle of the ring on live TV, the people would go batshit for it. Heel or babyface. But just kind of fast forwarding to the end here, and I know I'm going to backtrack. You had the deal where Rhea's beating up Dom with a kendo stick. Then from behind, she gets blindsided by Raquel Gomez Dominguez Fernandez IV. The running gag continues. Still have no idea what her actual last name is after they changed it 17 times. It used to be Rodriguez. I don't even know anymore. I also don't remember the last time I saw Raquel on the show. It's been at least a good solid year. I kind of forgot all about her. She did not do anything to impress upon her return. I'll say that much. She very clumsily planted Raquel with a one-handed powerbomb. Barely missed dropping her right on top of Liv's ankle. Then she threw Liv on top of Rhea after the ref had already stopped the match and called for a DQ. That was a big gaffe. I still have no idea for the record who actually won this match. I think Rhea won on the DQ call. If they announced it, I completely missed it. But I just had to point out that whole ending sequence, because yeah, that was very questionable. Whoever came up with that whole Raquel run-in idea, it needed to be thought through better. So the Dom thing, you know, far be it for me to get overly sensitive about shit. I'm not really wired that way. I know it's been 20 years, but they literally just put out a documentary on Vince McMahon that covered the Owen tragedy pretty substantially. It's always going to be one of those things. No matter how many times they bring it up, there's always going to be that negative aura around working stage pratfalls. I'm not saying what they did here was in poor taste, but when I saw Dom pick the lock on the cage door, and it's swinging open for a good minute or two before Dom finally leans over the side of it and falls out, obviously you knew they were going to make sure that his leg was fastened properly before even attempting a stunt like that. It's still a really sketchy thing to do. And it's always going to leave a bad taste in fans' mouths, because specifically of the Owen Hart thing. And the fact that there's still not really been full closure to that incident after all these years. Yeah, they settled the $15 million lawsuit or whatever it was back in 2000. But the stain is still there. It's not a matter of when things go wrong. It's the principle of what if. the what-if scenario that always leaves you on edge. What if the cable broke? What if something was faulty during the execution? No matter how many times they practiced it. Because they practiced the Owen Hart stunt multiple times. There was no way for Dom to protect himself here. If that cable snapped, he would have come straight down on top of his neck and that would have been it. He would have been dead. I know it's probably something people don't want to think about, but you had to figure it would spawn bad memories the minute they even attempted it. What was the purpose of it? I mean, I don't know, dude. It was just another questionable call. I did kind of laugh, when Rhea was talking with the official. They were showing it from the earpiece cam. So we hear Rhea say, "I'm going to go finish something with Dom, and then I'll be back to put away Liv." Very nonchalantly, the ref just goes, "Okay." Just, okay. Like, Rhea was asking for permission to use the water fountain in grade school. "Yeah, ref, I'm going to go beat the shit out of that asshole dangling from the shark cage, and then I'll just come back and resume the match." "No problem, Rhea. Take your time." That was humorous to me. And of course, that was when she was beating on Dom with the kendo stick, and Raquel came in and put a stop to that. Overall, it's kind of hard to gauge where they go with all this. Dom is basically a limp dick getting carried around by his slutty girlfriend and I guess their muscle or their enforcer. Which I guess is sort of a clever idea in theory. The idea that Dom is such a pussy, he needs to have a woman be the muscle of the group. That's actually a great weaselly heel tactic to drum up more heat on him. Again, though, it's the question of where does it all go and how often do we have to see Liv and Raquel wrestle? Rhea's obviously still going to be an integral piece to the puzzle, but the idea of swapping Liv versus Rhea for Raquel versus Rhea, not exactly the best trade-off. But then we arrive at the main event. Solo Sikoa and Jacob Fatu versus Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns. The Tribal Chief is back. The real Tribal Chief. Not that fake-ass oos parading around calling himself the Tribal Chief. They set up the deal with Cody and Roman meeting at the football field in Atlanta, basically agreeing to put their differences aside and work together to take out this Bloodline 2.0 group in very theatrical-like manner. Factoring in the talent here, you knew they would go above and beyond with the ring intros. And, that Cody intro, oof. That was rough. I don't know what the hell happened with the University of Arkansas marching band. I think they needed to spend a little bit longer playing along to a click track. I mean, I know a lot of those musicians are just faking it anyway, but there were a handful of trumpets that were almost an entire measure behind when they tried to sync it up with Cody's theme music. Like, you could tell they were really finagling around in the production truck to cover up for it, because it was bad. It was really bad. I mean, Roman's ring intro wasn't much better. That fucking blonde lady on the timpani just hitting random spots on the drum. No sense of rhythm. Seriously, WWE. I am a professional musician. I have a composition and percussion background. Pay me. I will gladly come into play for one of your special ring introductions. I am not asking for the book. I will come in to be a musician. A real one. They needed to cut it out with these garbage-ass fake musicians. Pisses me off. That all said, holy fuck, Roman was in great shape here. I know I just totally shifted gears in the conversation, but I needed to state that up front. He looked fucking phenomenal here, dude. I mean, I think Corey even mentioned on commentary that he was leaner and more jacked. Without a doubt, he was definitely trimmer around the midsection. Credit to him. All that time off, he stayed active in the gym. They've also managed to get OTC over after one show. You know, it's almost incredible to think about this, dude. All these years, all those attempts at Vince trying to force and pound and cram Roman down people's throats as a babyface. And it failed every single God blessed time. Who'd have thunk it? A year into the Paul Levesque era, with Vince completely gone from the picture, now Roman's getting unanimous babyface pops for everything he does. The irony. So going back to the thing I said regarding the Punk-McIntyre match, what should have main evented? Should they have closed with the Cell match and done this match in the opener? I mean, we can debate that until we're blue in the face. I still maintain the Cell match should have closed. But you can't take away from this being a big career-defining moment for Jacob Fatu. How long has he been with WWE? 3-4 months? The fact that he's main eventing a PLE with the top world champion and the second top babyface, that's nothing to scoff at. And just watching his work in this match, I would argue he looked better than Solo for a lot of it. And that's not a knock on Solo, because he was fine. But Jacob Fatu, man, he's got presence, he's got intensity, he's aware of where he needs to be for all the key spots. And I know he's been doing this for a while, but it can't be understated. If that guy can stay healthy and not do anything stupid, he's going to be a big deal in this company in a few years. Now, was this a classic tag team match that we're going to be talking about 5 to 10 years from now? No, I don't think so. It was good. It was a serviceable match that did what it needed to in order to advance the next chapter in the Bloodline story. I wouldn't say Roman was tentative here. He didn't really do a whole lot offensively. He had his flurry in the early goings. You know, broke out some of those older babyface spots we used to see when the crowd would boo most of it. But they traded off heat spots with Roman and Cody respectively. It really was kind of a big showcase piece for Solo and Fatu. There was a great crowd moment during this. Solo's in there working over Roman. It's relatively quiet in the building during that point. Quiet enough to where you could hear some of the people murmuring. So Solo yells, Who's the OTC? And you hear what appears to be a very young boy in the crowd respond, "Not you." Got him. Can't get more blunt of a response than that. Who's the OTC? Not you. Mic drop. Again, couple big dramatic near falls during the closing moments. Critical spot when Cody came in to break up a pin attempt, when Roman was pretty much on the verge of not kicking out. You get the big high spot where Cody gives Fatu the splash to the announce table. Eventually the Tonga brothers show up and try to run interference. But that leads to the point where Solo's trying to set up Roman for a spear in the corner. Meanwhile, on the floor, Tonga and Low are standing there looking up at Solo. And behind them, there is a masked hooded dude that everybody instantly knew was Jimmy Uso. So he levels the Tongans with super kicks, lowers the bandana to show his face. Then Roman gives Solo the spear. 1, 2, 3. And admittedly, the Jimmy Uso return got a big pop. And I don't think we've seen him since the night after WrestleMania when Solo laid him out. And of course, when you tie in the relationship with him and Roman, it was pretty dicey there right before the transition of power, so to speak. You know, Jimmy and Jay both had their issues with Roman at one point. I think that was all before Jimmy sided with Roman again. But he's been pretty loyal to Roman since the beginning. Now that sets up the interesting scenario here and everything that led to the post-match. Because you get Roman and Jimmy endorsing Cody. They're getting ready to head to the back. But then Cody gets jumped by the bloodline again. So Roman has to make an instinctual decision on whether or not to save Cody. And he eventually comes to his senses. Helps run off the heels one more time. It was kind of funny. Jimmy and Roman are talking on the floor, and Jimmy's like, "You got to save him, Moose." And Roman just goes, "That was a one-time thing." It had to be an ad-lib. But again, he came in to lend a hand. They ran off the heels. And while you still had Roman obsessing over the world title during the whole engagement, he does eventually pass the belt off to Cody. And that's kind of when you get that clarity of, all right, these guys are on the same page. They put their differences aside. And that in and of itself would have been fine closure to the event. But they threw in that one little extra curveball in there with the return of The Rock. That's where things really got spicy. Because this is perfect with the way they did all this. You had Rock coming out as the neutral party, never took sides, never embraced the babyfaces or the heels. He comes out, does a long stare down from the entryway, gave Roman and Cody the people's eyebrow, and then he did the 1-2 throat slash deal, whatever that meant. But that was it. Didn't make any intentions clear with whose side he's on. And that's good. Because it leaves you guessing for what's going to happen on the upcoming TV programs. I mean, not only is Jimmy Uso back in the fold now, but The Rock is back. And it's an interesting numbers game. It's still technically 4-on-4 advantage heels. You got Solo, you got Fatu, you got both the Tongan brothers. But then on the other side, you get Roman, you got Cody, you got Jimmy. Rock, we don't know where he stands. There is still the lingering possibility that they bring Jay back in and fill out the rest of the babyface side. Now, I know WWE's apparently signed a couple other Samoan family members they've been keeping under the radar. Hikuleo, I think, was one of them. So they laid out a lot here. It's very interesting. Plus, they got whatever's going on with Kevin Owens, too. I heard that was an angle they shot during the post-show. Apparently, he attacked Cody Rhodes in the parking lot or something like that. It's another clever tactic to force people into watching the TV show this week to see what happens there. I mean, personally, I'm of the old school mindset. If you really want the people to care, you should air it to the public. Don't shoot something as exclusive content and then expect people to care when you reveal what's really going on. But it is leaving you with more and more anticipation coming out of the event. And ideally, that's what a lot of these middle ground PLEs should be. You don't have to cap off every single feud on the in-between shows. Just give people a reason to want to tune in to see what happens next. And they absolutely succeeded with all that. Especially in the outer extremes of the show. The opener and the main event. Again, totally understand them wanting to close the show with the Rock angle. It's WWE politics at its finest. Rock agrees to make a special cameo, but only if he gets the main event slot, brother. Because you got to do business his way. He's on the board, damn it. And all joking aside, I mean, it would be kind of difficult to follow The Rock's return with whatever the second match on the card was. Nia Jax and Bayley. Yeah, that would have come off like a fart in church. So I would definitely say the outer portions of the card were what you need to go out of your way to see. Middle of the show, you could probably take or leave that. But they brought back the bad blood concept. They had the perfect match to facilitate the gimmick. I don't really know if they need to do this every single year. But as a special occasion gimmick match and definitely fitting in with the idea of the bad blood pay-per-view concept, I'd be down to see another couple of these. But again, they're giving you just enough to want to see what happens as we follow up with the programming headed into Survivor Series. Not enough to vindicate me watching 3 hours of Raw and 2 hours of SmackDown every week. But enough to keep me intrigued with continuing along with the monthly PLEs. Something hit me when I was watching Retro Raw this week. Over the past couple shows, I've noticed the overall booking's been a lot more tolerable. Things make sense. There's less of the usual bad Vince comedy we've been accustomed to throughout all of 95. And then a thought occurred to me. No idea why it never dawned on me the minute I noticed the quality of the shows were getting better. When did Bill Watts come in for that brief run in 95? You remember there was like that 2 or 3 month window where Watts came in and helped on the creative end of things? It had to have been during this time. That cannot be coincidental. When you think back to the spring of 95, even most of the summer, especially the build to SummerSlam, these shows were ungodly wretched. And then right as SummerSlam wrapped up, we headed into the fall season. All of a sudden, shows have a massive uptick in quality. I refuse to believe it's coincidence. This had to have been when Watts came in to help out with the booking. The biggest giveaway to me is the lack of stupid comedy bullshit. No more doink. They finally canned that gimmick. at least for the foreseeable future. Mantar, I think they finally pulled the plug on that garbage. Akushi is no more. They still got Duke the Dumpster around, but he seemed to have fallen off the face of the earth. I mean, they still got the fake Dennis and the fake Pirates roaming around. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. But overall, I just can't help but keep mentioning, it's like all of a sudden, the fall season hit here in 1995. The shows are actually watchable. I know that probably seems like a backhanded compliment, but trust me, if you've been following our reviews throughout this year, you know the shitstorm we've had to trudge through. I mean, on top of the steroid trial and all the legal scandals Vince was dealing with around this time, business overall being at a low point in terms of gate numbers and live event sales, pay-per-view buys were down. You know, let's not forget Nitro being about a month into their run on the Turner Network. I mean, this was easily one of the worst years the company ever did financially. Someone could fact check me on that, but I'm pretty sure 95 was the worst recorded year for WWE financials. Maybe 93 was worse. So like I say, I'm hoping things work out with this new Netflix deal and they decide to move all the old WWF content over into the archive library. Because I've been enjoying going back and talking about these retro Raws. It's been a struggle getting through most of this year. I mean, that was sort of my plan when I decided to start from the beginning and work my way through the entire library. Maybe it was too good to be true in hindsight. Because now I don't even know if we'll have access to any of the old footage after January. But we'll keep our fingers crossed and hope things work out so we can pick up with things in 96. Where we do definitely start to see a little bit of a pickup. Took a while to get going because, I mean, 96 was surely not a banner year for the company overall. It was just less shitty than 95. Tell you what wasn't shitty was the opening tag match on this week's program. On this special Columbus Day holiday edition of Retro Raw. Do we even celebrate Columbus Day anymore? I don't even know if public schools have off on Columbus Day in 2024. We've made up so many bogus holidays over the years. I just kind of figured poor Christopher Columbus got knocked off the pedestal. In any case, it's Owen Hart, Davey Boy, and Yokozuna versus Diesel, Shawn Michaels, and The Undertaker. Good old classic six-man to open up the card. I do have to take a moment to mock WWF's attempts here in 1995 in making Shawn a sympathetic babyface. We all know that boyhood dream story is working its magic every single week. Vince is destined to make Shawn the most likable personality on the entire roster. So they sent him out to Washington, D.C. as a publicity stunt to meet with a bunch of young, struggling kids and talk about the importance of education or something like that. Of course, I'm laughing because it's Shawn Michaels. The biggest walking douchebag on the entire roster with an ego bigger than Yokozuna's ass. And you're going to use him as a guinea pig to preach about education and saying your prayers and eating your vitamins. What a joke. Of course, by this point, Vince had his tongue firmly jammed down Shawn's throat, saying he's the most charismatic, the most influential, the most exciting talent in the company. Dude. I mean, at this point, he should have just gone off the headset and asked Shawn to give him a BJ on the spot. So shameless. But getting past all that garbage, and them trying to make Shawn the corporate poster boy babyface, well, they finally rang the bell to start the match after about 5 minutes of ring intros, plus 2 commercial breaks. Unironically, Lawler made a joke about Shawn being a complete mark for himself in the first minute. Problem was, I think Lawler meant it as a joke. Smart fans understand the reality of the situation. Try not to get hung up on Shawn, though. I know it's easy. The match was really fun overall. The finish was flatter than a plate full of piss, but I'll get to that in a minute. But everyone worked their roles well. It was all baby faces in the early goings where the heels were struggling to get out of the gate. They eventually cut off Shawn and worked him over for a good chunk of the heat. I did note, one of WWF's favorite things to do in matches, and it drives me up a wall constantly, the completely superfluous 1,000-yard stare from outside talent. The whole idea is, will so-and-so run interference or do something to cause a distraction and fuck over one of the boys? Then it turns out all they do is stand there on the floor and do nothing, except detract from the action. I mean, they had Waylon Mercy up on the ramp for no discernible reason. Just vanished. Was never seen for the remainder of the program. Later on, they had Shane Douglas out there taking notes and apparently writing up a grocery list or something. Played no integral part of the match. Also, Diesel could get the hot tag, run wild for approximately 45 seconds, as my notes deem. It may have been 20 seconds looking back. Because I specifically remember, Diesel stood on the apron and did virtually nothing for the entire match. The minute he gets the hot tag from Shawn, I think he threw like 2 or 3 punches at the heels. Then Davey Boy scooped him up for a power slam. They ran a distraction spot with Earl Hebner and The Undertaker. That way Yoko could sneak in and give Diesel a leg drop. Then Bulldog just covered Diesel and pinned him 1, 2, 3. Completely out of nowhere. Even Vince was caught off guard by it. And then afterwards, there's the big schmoz where Taker's trying to fight off all the heels. King Mabel ran in and helped Corny's team lay out Taker. Meanwhile, Douglas reappeared on the floor and dropped Michaels over the ring steps. And I think the Michaels-Douglas thing was supposed to set up an IC title match for the next In Your House. I'm a little hairy on the details with the timeline here, but pretty sure that match ends up getting scrapped. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't this around the time Shawn got into that altercation in New York with some Navy SEAL or something like that? Basically got his ass pummeled. So they had to take him off the card because he got hurt. Top babyface, ladies and gents. Future world champion of the largest wrestling organization in the world. Beaten up by an armed force veteran, made to look like a total fool. Great pick, Vince. No wonder Watts only stuck around for a short stint. And, as far as Davey pinning Diesel, pretty obvious with that setting up. I mean, they're going to wind up headlining for the WWF title. I have no idea what Mabel had to do with any of this. I know we're still coming up on that infamous moment when Mabel accidentally breaks Taker's orbital bone. Can't recall if that match ever ends up happening or not. I mean, I still thought it happened way back at like SummerSlam in August. Apparently it was a lot later than I remembered. Guess we'll know when we see Taker come out with that giant fucking phantom mask. Again, though, pretty hot start to the program. Definitely had a lot of Mid-South elements to the layout. Big chaotic brawls, heavy action, angles to set up things for later on down the road. Telling you, man, it had Bill Watts' fingerprints all over it. And like they even stayed on it when they came back from break. They showed all the officials attending to the three baby faces, trying to help them back to their feet after the mugging. And while that's all going down, they're replaying some of the Bret Hart footage to sort of hype the big cage match next week between him and Isaac Yankem. Now remember last show, Yankem came out during the tail end of the Bret Hart-Jean-Pierre match and DDT'd Bret on the floor. Of course, that came after Bret and Lawler had already started fighting by the guardrail. So they showed that, plus the SummerSlam match they had. Not the whole thing, obviously, just the edited highlights. And it was during that segment where Vince announced the stipulations regarding the cage match. And I think I've got this correct. There will already be in place a shark cage at ringside if by some off chance that Lawler would happen to try to interfere in a cage match. Because, you know, wrestling tropes die hard. And how the fuck are you going to have a cage match without somebody trying to run interference? Even though the sole purpose of a cage match is to prevent interference? I mean, so they're pretty much telling you up front that Lawler's going to try to cheat. And when he does, he'll be placed inside the shark cage and then hoisted above the ring while the match is in progress. So in other words, it's a cage match where one of the other heels will be suspended above the ring in a cage of his own. You know, Jim Cornette coined a term for that. It's called a hat on a hat. Adding on gimmicks for already gimmicked matches. Like, think about how stupid this is. They're going to book a cage match where it's solely designed to keep people out from ringside. But just in case that Lawler tries to interfere anyway, he himself will be placed inside of a cage during a cage match. Which begs the question, why not just put a fucking roof on the cage? Is it that hard? By the way, when I mentioned they only replayed the edited highlights of the SummerSlam bout, it was essentially 80% of the match. They just had dubbed over commentary with McMahon raking Lawler over the coals for the constant interference. And Lawler's trying to defend himself, saying it was justified. But at least we know next week, the blow-off to the feud, where we finally put an end to this Bret Hart, Jerry Lawler program after 2 long fucking years. Cannot wait, because it is long overdue. So then we eventually had Skip versus Fatu, which is mainly just an infomercial while the announcers were plugging a bunch of shit happening with all the main event talent. An example of which being Mabel allegedly trying to break into The Undertaker's locker room. To which the thought occurred to me, Taker has a dressing room? I'd have loved to have seen a personalized private Undertaker locker room in 1995. I'm sure he kept it clean. I know we talked earlier about WWF kind of laying off the really stupid gimmicks in the last month or so. They did have a few leftover bad gimmick ideas. They were both a part of this match. Notice how I didn't say anything bad about the talent. Just pointing out the stupid gimmick concepts. So the entire story of this was Skip being a complete fucking idiot for constantly targeting Fatu's head. But of course, he's Samoan. Therefore, his skull is impervious to pain. So Skip's trying to throw all these punches and such. Keeps hurting his hand. At one point, he went up and hit a diving headbutt, but hurt himself as a result. Finally, Skip threw his back out trying to give Fatu a superplex. So Fatu punched him off the middle turnbuckle, gave him a big superfly splash for the 3. Skip sold it by lifting his legs directly in the air and staying straight for about 30 full seconds. He totally did not give a fuck by this point. And why would he? I know this street preacher from the hood gimmick is only really a thing for under a year. I mean, the Sultan wasn't much better in 96. But at least people remember that gimmick to an extent. This 1995 version of Fatu was just... Not only was it terrible, it was forgettably terrible. No idea how Vince ever thought this would get over. I mean, easily that was the low point of this week's program. But it only went like 5 minutes, if that. Then they went back and revisited the stuff we saw at the top of the program, which they followed with 2 separate interview segments. Oh, in actuality, it was only 1. Doc's interview with the babyfaces did not go according to plan. Basically show Hayes standing outside some generic-looking door in the boiler room. Just so happens it had a sign next to it that read, Men's Locker Room. And he confirms that he spoke with Taker, Diesel, and Shawn before the break. But it became a heated situation, so he doesn't want to stir up any more trouble. So instead we pitched to Jim Ross, who just nonchalantly barges into the heel locker room without knocking. Because he's JR, and he does not give a fuck. Love that man. So he runs into JC and Davey Boy. Cornette is wearing pink slacks with a WWF t-shirt. It was almost as comical as seeing Davey Boy stand there topless while also wearing a baseball cap. But JC gets over the story that Bulldog scored the victory over Diesel earlier. Therefore, he's earned the right to challenge for the WWF title. Only the next time he pins Diesel, he'll be walking out with the gold. Then he's going to take it back to the UK so us Americans don't get to see it ever again. Because we're not deserving of it. And Davey Boy kind of drove the point home. Talked about beating Brett in Wembley Stadium back at SummerSlam 92. What a great moment that was. But the greater moment's going to come when he beats Diesel in that hellhole known as Winnipeg and leaves In Your House as the new WWF champion. And then Mabel came in and talked about The Undertaker for a minute. I kind of zoned out after that point because nobody gives a shit about Mabel. But it's like I said at the top, man. These shows have drastically improved since the fallout to SummerSlam. The shows have energy. They flow a lot better. I'm not insulted as a viewer having to watch a bunch of hokey matches and stupid gimmicks for the entire hour. I mean, it's not Mid-South circa 1983 to 85. But it's about as close as we come to solid WWF programming since we started these retro reviews. I mean, 93 had a couple memorable moments. I remember the build to WrestleMania 10 being pretty enjoyable. But the last string of shows since early September of 95, I don't remember things being this consistently good for a very long time. Again, who we thank for that? Whether it's Bill Watts or Jim Ross or Jim Cornette, combination of the bunch having influence with the week-to-week booking, I don't know. Technically, I don't think JR becomes part of the booking committee until is it 97? Maybe 96? Regardless, they're on an upward trend, and I hope it continues through the remainder of the year. It's nice to have a little bit of optimism about the state of Retro Raw. So, it's going to round out this show here. Again, I'm going to do my best to get the editing started so I can upload this in a timely fashion. So make sure y'all subscribe, comment, like the show if you have not already. Again, you can check us out on Rumble or YouTube, Mondays and Fridays. We'll keep monitoring the situation with the Retro Raw and NXT things as we head out through the remainder of the year. If we have to make some modifications, we will, but we'll keep things going as usual for the time being. And we'll catch you guys on Friday for the continuation of the territory coverage. So thanks, everybody, and talk to you soon. Peace out.